first conversation that we had, a podcast, if you will, we were talking about Lear Siegler. And on this part, I want to focus more around Falco Data Products. I also think it would be interesting and insightful. And what we'll get into more is kind of like, we did talk about your motivation at the tail end of that podcast. So I encourage people to listen to that first one. But then I want to get more into what it must have been like, actually taking that leap of faith that you would have, again, you were very comfortable and now suddenly you have this idea and this drive to start your own computer company back when the Silicon Valley was really just becoming a thing, right? Where it was becoming or known as the Silicon Valley like it is today. So just one housekeeping item. I wanted to, because I thought this was interesting. It is a memory of mine. And I do believe I was a young kid back in your office at Lear Siegler, because occasionally I have no reason why, I had no idea how, but you would like bring me to work or mom would drop me off. I don't know what was going on, but I would be in like your big executive office. And I have a lot of fond memories of sitting there, and I would turn on your computer terminal, which is attached to nothing. And I'd have to put it into that special mode where if it's not attached to a computer, I forget what that's called, like an echo mode or something, just so I could type. But what I was going to tell you is I have the memory, although you don't, so let's be fair, but I have the memory of you telling me like, hey, do you know, Kobe, we actually sell, because lowercase was like so uppercase was the standard for all of the characters on the screen. And then lowercase became a thing. And as the ASCII world kind of expanded, obviously, and I remember you telling me that there was some sale or something, and you said actually that lowercase, you're actually charging $50 for lowercase. Like I have this memory, and I don't know why, but you don't remember that, do you?
No, I don't. I do remember we added lowercase. I don't recall if we got anything for it. I know some of the features that Kachin at Falco Data that he included in the product, we did charge for.
Right.
But I know the lowercase was an option, but I don't recall if we charged.
Yeah, it's just funny. It is funny to just think that uppercase was the standard, if you will. Then lowercase kind of came into place. It's just kind of a funny thing now, especially nowadays when you think of all the stuff we have. And then so let's transition then to, the whole point here is to get more into Falco Data Products. So again, you're getting ready to leave Lear Siegler, and what I'm going to speak to is some of my memories, and then you can backfill the story with more, I guess, facts because you lived it. I was really kind of in the shadows in many ways. So one of the things that I remember is that you purchased, I think, that Ford pickup truck. So I don't know what like the sequence of events and things. I think it would be interesting though is like I know for a fact I think you bought the Ford pickup truck from Lear Siegler. That was like a white Ford pickup truck.
Right.
Yep. And then you also ended up over time grabbing a lot of Lear Siegler employees to work for you, right? I don't know how many, but can you maybe talk about that? Like what, once you made that commitment and then what that was like?
It wasn't a lot. It was 2 or 3 of the key people. But remember, my co-founder of Falco Data was Kachin Lee, and Kachin was not at Lear Siegler at all.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
And
he was
a very key part to our development. I couldn't have done it without him for sure, because he was the technical. I was sales and Kachin was technical, and that was the way it was all developed. But we had a few Lear Siegler people, but not a lot. But we did have them.
So do you remember the planning part of this? I mean, I know that was a ways back, but like when you had this motivation to leave Lear Siegler, you must have felt overwhelming, I'm assuming, because again, it's a very entrepreneurial thing. to walk away from a very secure job and to try to start your own computer company, which, by the way, it's not like it's not a cheap object to manufacture, and it's a massive commitment, with resources, et cetera. So,
well, I think if you're asking, it was a better, at the time, it was a little better technology. Caution had developed more software features, because back then, so many of the features and the product overall were hardware driven. There was firmware, but very little what you would call software.
right.
And was very, in fact, I may stand corrected on this, I don't know, but as I recall, he developed one of the first movable cursors on the screen, as I understand it. There might be somebody that'll debate that, but I know he was very instrumental in providing that as a unique feature for the Falco terminals. And the other thing we did that made us unique was we were focused primarily on private label type market, and a lot of people were end users, and we were not. That's kind of getting into some of the detail, but I would say in general, I went out and I got venture capital money, and it's going back, my goodness, almost 50 years. In fact, it is 50 years. So, wow. And my point is that back then, the PCs were just barely becoming a development thing.
Right.
IBM was just getting the operating system. That's when companies like Microsoft were founded.
Right.
We were right before that.
But you're right. Your computer terminals were connecting to what could be considered, like either a mainframe or a mid-range system. I don't think they called it back then, correct?
Well, they called them mid-range, mainframes. Yes, we connected to mainframes. And for some people, our system was more economical than a PC if they had mainframes already.
Yeah, like Digital Equipment Corporation, right? DEC PDP 1140, the 44. I remember that series, and even Falco Data Products had that computer system.
We did. In fact, in that area of peripherals with DEC, Digital Equipment Corp, out of Boston, we competed with them in that area. Yeah.
Okay. And then as far as the computer, the computer terminal itself, one of the other things I was curious about was because you talked about the difference between what was called then, and you had quite a large success at a dumb terminal. You're now really coming up with a more revolutionary smart terminal.
Right.
And so instead of dip switches, physical dip switches, for those who knows what those are, or escape keys that had to be received by the terminal or entered into the keyboard to set a certain function, you actually Falco had a pretty ingenious, what I think was at the time was a menu button that when you push the menu button, it would visually pull up what the features were. So you could literally move the cursor around and say, yes, I want this feature. I want this feature. What used to be escape keys, right? I mean, isn't that who came up with? I was curious about that. Who came up with that setup button? Cochin. Okay, very cool.
Yeah, he really did. Was he was very knowledgeable and creative on software. He was a genius at it. He really was. I'm sure still is, but I meant back then when we were together.
Oh yeah.
And he was very forward thinking when it came to trying to convert more and more from hardware features to software features. And I think that made us stand out for a while. And we grew the company decently.
And how did you meet Kachin?
I'm trying to think.
I know he went to Stanford University.
Yeah, he graduated from Stanford. In fact, I went to his graduation.
That's cool.
Let me think.
Because there was no LinkedIn, needless to say, back then.
There was a gentleman, I'll just use his first name.
Yeah, that's fine.
His name is, we'll call him Ed. And he was working with Kachin.
The same Ed that I know?
Probably.
Your first, yes. Okay.
So
he
worked.
Go ahead.
He worked for Kachin. I'm sorry, Kachin worked for him, and somehow, and a parts guy or somebody, because I was looking to start the company and I hadn't really had anybody yet, right? Because I'm not an engineer,
right?
I'm a salesman. So anyway, I got a hold of this guy. Said you should talk to this guy Kachin Lee and Ed, because they've got a warehouse. They're working on a similar product that you may be interested in. And so I went over and I really hit it off with Ed and Kachin. And Kachin was very young. He was just getting ready to graduate from Stanford.
Oh, yeah.
And so they offered, Ed was a sweetheart, really. He saw what I was doing. So he gave me not so much money, but a place to start Falco Data Products. He gave me a warehouse, no rent. It was really...
calling it a warehouse is giving it a little bit of credit, I would say. And the other thing, I want to step back a little bit, because venture capital money. So did you actually get VC money before you left or while you were leaving? Because no. That's what I thought. You started this actually on your own. And that's actually an important call out, right? Because you started this really what could be considered on the cheap.
I would say the first phase, I started it on a very shoestring budget.
Absolutely. So you were smart about it. I think that's really important to call that out, because if people have ideas like this, they don't just, it's not like magic. Like sometimes it can be, right? If you have all the right people with all the right backing, it can happen.
Yep.
But it's rare when that happens. It's, I would say, beautiful when things can grow organically. And I think this was one of those moments where, because I remember the warehouse. And in fact, I had a summer job working there where that business that was there that Ed was responsible for was recycling old computer equipment. So I remember for my summer job taking circuit boards that had the gold, anything with gold on it, we would kind of cut those out.
And melt it down, you bet.
Exactly. So that was a thing. And again, it was like it was basically like a dump in the back. And it was rough. But then upstairs, I remember there was like, offices, everything was fairly old.
They were homemade offices, handmade.
Exactly. Right. And I think that's important, because you didn't start out, it wasn't so, I would say, glamorous. And it certainly wasn't, it wasn't, someone would have a hard time thinking anything magical could come from a building like that. But it actually, I think something did. So
it did for a while. It sure did.
Yep. And so when when Kachin designed the first TS1, he did that on what I believe, I don't know if they still call it that today, but back then it was called a breadboard, which is the engineering wiring, right?
That's correct. They called breadboards because it was all hardware. I mean, they were firmware, of course, and that was Kachin's expertise, the firmware software kind of combination. And so we did have a breadboard,
which is pre-circuit board. So before you get what's called the exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Before you get the printed circuit board, before that is done, you do the breadboard, which confirms the routing of the the electrical circuits, if you will, where you're wiring up all of the chips, correct?
That's correct.
And then Kachin put your first one together on a breadboard, and then you were getting this ready, from what I remember, for, I think it was called Comdex, right? The computer.
I think it was down in Anaheim, and we really were trying to get the actual circuit board ready, but let's just say we couldn't do it. So what we did is we just got the breadboard and we put it in a cabinet so it hit it. And we weren't hiding the fact that it was a breadboard because it was a prototype. We told people.
Exactly.
But it was advanced. It was, at the time, the only thing that superseded our product was the PC. But that's like saying the atom bomb. But
Yeah.
but at the time, yes, it was very advanced. Kachin had a lot more firmware, software, so to speak, in it. And
well, and the reason why you put it behind in the cabinet is because it was too big. It was, of course, it's a prototype. So
you're right, it wouldn't fit in the house.
Exactly. It doesn't fit in the housing of the computer, but it was a really cool design. I'll actually put a video up to show everybody what the system looks like. And it's really cool because it's a detachable keyboard, and the keyboard connects using that kind of telephone cable connection.
Yep.
And then the keyboard itself is uses magnets. Like, it's a little magnet, passes through the circuit, and it just captures all of the keys that are pushed. It's such a cool design, allows for airflow.
Right.
The way it connects in the back, it's just such a beautiful design. So who actually did design the casing itself?
I think that was a gentleman he was an outside mechanical design. In other words, we hired him as a consultant, and his name was Mel Rudin.
Oh, funny.
And he was really good.
Yeah, because it's such a cool design. And again, I have one and it works.
He's the only thing.
Yeah.
In other words, it had a structure within a structure, because
right.
And no one had ever done that. So we had a skeleton frame with a skin cover. In other words, to have the housing have integrity, you needed that framework. In other words, it was designed that way for a reason, so we could use that frame, like an automobile. There were some automobiles by GM at that time that they used the same frame. Right. In other words, even though they were different products, they were designed to use the same skeleton structure.
Right.
And that's what we wanted. So we had that way we didn't, every time we came up with a new computer peripheral or terminal or CRT or whatever you want to call it, we didn't have to change everything and redo the tooling. We had the base skeletal item, and then we could just put that in there, and it would have, and since the keyboard was detached, if it had items and features that another model or another one didn't have, then we could just add that, even though the circuit board, I'll call it the TS2, was different than a TS1 without a lot of major changes.
Yeah. In fact, you could, and it was actually really easy. I remember it's super easy to disassemble. There's 4 screws in the back, and to your point, it just kind of the back portion of it slides out.
Right.
And then you can immediately have access to the CRT or the main motherboard down below that sits in a tray, and it just slides out. You just disconnect it, it slides out. So even like if you wanted to swap out the EEPROM, right? I remember there being an EEPROM software.
That's exactly correct. Yeah, EEPROM.
Erasable memory. Yep, that was it was really cool. So you could just easily maintain the terminal as well. There were certain it was, and I think it was pretty straightforward to work on.
It was.
That's really cool.
And again, Conscience Lee came up with that design,
Yeah,
not the mechanical, but the software design.
yeah, yeah.
But,
And
you know,
one of the so I remember too, I had a job there too. Don't
right.
ask me how I got all these
No,
jobs.
actually, Lee,
I knew
both you
someone.
and Lee, but you had a job that was quite significant because you were working with Conscience Lee
Yeah, that was so much
on
fun.
software.
He was so great to work for. Really, just so much fun to hang around engineers, to be able to solder, and code. Even it was a tremendous amount of fun. And there was, even though people did work hard at Falco, there were a bunch of, I have so many fond memories. And another one was, I think it was Kachin's brother Paul
Right.
had written this Empire, or he didn't write the game, but he got it to work on the computer system. So
Okay.
through firmware, he had an EEPROM that would burn, and you could essentially play the Unix game Empire. If anybody, I'll put a frame up. Basically, it's like war using text characters, and we would play this for hours on the weekend. So it would start after work on Friday, and you could, it was like networking. So you would network between two computers. You just needed an RS-232 connection,
Right.
and on either computer, and you would basically start playing this war simulation, and we would play until sometimes like 3 a.m. It was ridiculous,
Oh,
but it was so much
yeah.
fun. You would sit
Yeah.
there and just like someone would go, and then it would be your turn, and then you start out with so many armies and cities and things like that, and it would grow over time. And the objective is to take over, obviously, and dominate the other player. But that was so much fun. It was so I can't thank you enough too for allowing me to have that experience with the people that you built in the company. And so I
Well,
wanted to kind of
certainly.
interject maybe a little bit more on this one, because
Uh,
I wanted to let you know too that I had a lot of fun. The TS1, you had I think some excellent success, and you were selling that computer terminal also worldwide, correct?
that is correct. Yes.
Yeah. And then as you started to grow Falco and evolve, you came out with other models. One funny memory I have is the Fame computer series, and maybe you could talk about what happened with the Fame computer
Well,
terminal.
it had a lot of neat features. Looking back at it now, the design, the housing design, was a little too far out, and frankly, I didn't like it, and I think a lot of the team didn't like it. And but they we went with it. It had a lot more software features, a lot more hardware features, but the design itself was not what I call appealing, or not as attractive, if you will, as the TS1 or the TS
Yeah,
series. I think we had TS2 as well. So that, but the Fame name was an interesting, because it really helped promote the product. Uh, we found out that we got a letter from the Broadway production of Fame. It was a musical at the time in New York City, saying we can't use that name even for electronics because it's a copyrighted name. So we had to change it. And I'll be honest with you, I don't remember what we named it.
oh, interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just remember you coming home and saying something about that, like you came up with the new name, Fame, and then it looked, I think the logo looked a lot like, because I think the movie was big too. It just come out, I think.
It could have
So
been.
So Fame, the movie, and the name of the Falco terminal, right? There was a collision there where I think they felt like, you know, this terminal
Well,
was, even though it was unassociated, obviously two different completely markets.
right, right.
They weren't happy with it.
Well, the way they explained it to us, I mean, we did it immediately. We
Yeah.
honored their request. We didn't make a big deal out of it. It's just, I can't remember what we renamed it. But we did, and it was relatively successful. The I don't recall any additional features. It was a totally detachable keyboard. It had a lot, and the case was easy to get into. It was a lighter weight computer terminal, but stronger extrusion plastic.
Yeah.
So it had a few advances, but I didn't think it was very appealing design. I don't even remember. I don't think that particular one. I was involved in the design part of it, to be honest with you.
Gotcha. Yeah, it did lack. I mean, it looks like
A box.
yeah. Well, it was a more modern look, but I think that's what you and I were also talking about at one time, is that it's a more modern look in some ways, but it lost its certain charisma, or
Yeah, it was a modern. No, it was a modern look, and maybe today even it would be considered a little. I don't want to use the word space age. That's overdone, but it had. It was kind of like a minimalist computer terminal, so it would fit in an avant-garde kind of thing.
yeah, it just
But
didn't have a lot of character. Like
no,
yeah, like the TS1 design, I still love it today. I just think it's just such a neat thing, just something that you would see, in a movie or something. It's much more interesting than the Fame series.
well, the ADM to me, going back to Lear
Oh
Sigma for a
yeah,
minute,
yeah.
the ADM series, the ADM 1, 2, and 3, and we also had a smart terminal. I forgot what we named it. That design it comes along once in a lifetime, and
Yeah.
it's hard to have a home run every time, and that was a big home run.
Oh,
But
definitely.
you go on. But anyway, after that, I was really suffering from some personal issues and needed a lot of therapy, and I had begun to, I guess, kind of escape out of the company to try to see what I could do to help myself.
Yeah.
And so I had almost given up running the company on a day-to-day basis. And so I don't blame the board of directors. They fired me, and I obviously didn't. I was disappointed, but I was also very relieved. And I knew if I felt that relieved, I had problems.
Yeah.
And I had let a lot of people down, and that bothered me too. And I think had they worked with me while I was getting therapy, uh, it would have worked out very similar to what Steve Jobs did with Apple when they brought him back. I'm not comparing our size or product lines to Apple in any way, but I am saying that if they hadn't brought him back, I don't think they'd be an Apple today. And
Yeah.
so
Agreed.
we certainly was not in the Apple league at that time, but we were also not a small company. We certainly had the potential,
Yeah. And
but
at the time, we did the
yeah,
math, right? It's at the time your company was pulling in between 75 and $100 million in today's money.
in today's money, yes.
Right.
And so and we were profitable, but
Right.
I had I hadn't abandoned the company, but I certainly wasn't involved as much as a CEO should have been of his company.
Yeah.
And so I was not surprised at what the board did. I was disappointed in the person they picked to replace me, and it just continued from that point on because I was the heart and soul of that company,
Right.
but I had kind of abandoned it. I have to admit, and it took me a long time to come to grips with all of that. But I also realized it was, with the therapy I got and counseling, I was able to turn my life around, and it ended up very, very successful, except for Falco Data Products, which I just unfortunately was not in good space at that time. And, shoulda, woulda, coulda is not going to do any good. It's gone. It's been 40 years approximately since 40, yeah, about 40 years since then. And so most of the people, I'm sure the investors I had are long gone. But if they were here today, I would tell them they made a good decision. It was just unfortunate that they didn't leave the door open so I could come back, because I did want to come back. I just knew I wasn't prepared or ready to come back until I got well, until I got better.
And there were really,
and I did.
yeah, absolutely. And sorry to interrupt, but and there were really two key factors there. Not only did they not let you come back, but it's also the person they selected to take your place, because that person made key decisions that ultimately, and I think just out of maybe I don't know why they made the decisions they made, but they ended up really hurting Falco Data Products. Where
they actually took it down, yeah.
Right, but do you think it was purposeful, or was it just really just bad decision making?
No, I think it was bad decision making, because remember, I had some really good venture capitalists in there, and I can't imagine them wanting to lose their investment.
One of the other, and I don't know if this is something. Yeah, I guess we can't really get into that either. I don't know.
What's that?
Well, just
this individual, and I even talked to the board of directors, but they wouldn't interfere. And he put out a press release it was a huge order. It was, in fact, that order, ironically, would have made Falco Data Products still survive.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a 6,000 terminal order.
Wow.
I'm like, yeah, it was huge. Largest one I ever sold to an individual company. And they love me, and they love the product, and they glad that I did it. And even though they knew I wasn't any longer involved with the day-to-day management of the company, in fact, I had left the board of directors at that time. I think I was off the board, but but he, without approval, you could say this, without approval, Falco Data Products, without my okay in any way, put out a press release without Microsoft's approval, and the order was canceled. And I don't want to say who canceled it, but certainly the executive management of Microsoft must have canceled the order, because they're a very private company, right? And you can't do any kind of press release with them unless they've approved it,
right?
And that's the way it should be. And unfortunately, some individual at Falco Data Products made a very bad decision, and I tried to stop it with the board of directors, and they refused to get involved, which means they didn't have much faith in me or believe in me. And that was very difficult, because that would have really cemented our success for at least a couple of years more. It was a multi-million-dollar contract even then.
Oh yeah.
At 6,000 terminals. But we were big enough on the Microsoft campus Somewhere I've got a photograph of it. I don't know where we actually had our office in Building 11, and it said
Oh
Falco
wow,
Data. It said Falco Data Products.
I
We
didn't
had
know
a
that.
yeah we had our own technician on campus because we had that many Falco terminals on campus before the large order.
That's amazing. Yeah, and that's where I was telling you also is that that one time. It's funny how our paths kind of crossed, you know, because I wasn't always necessarily living with you, but we, our
No,
paths crossed a lot in this industry, obviously, because I got into the IT world too. But
you sure
that's
did.
where I ended up doing that. I had an interview at Microsoft, and I um, I was sitting down, walked into the office, and sat down, and right next to me on my left, like I remember it like it was yesterday, was a Falco Data Products terminal. And immediately I thought, this is probably not good because I just thought this is like, I don't mind that, it's name recognition, like right there. It was just so awkward because the guy interviewing me, um, I can't remember who it was, but clearly didn't like that this was the case. Now, the first guy I interviewed with, not that guy, the first guy at Microsoft I interviewed with, he was very welcoming. He wanted me to be on his team, et cetera, et cetera. But it was the higher up level that I had an interview with, and it was that guy. Unfortunately, just like oil and water. I kept trying to get him to relax, to try to, I
Yeah.
would answer questions, and he just was not having any of it. Did not
Hmm.
enjoy himself. It's kind of like when it's over the moment you meet someone. You just
Right.
get this vibe
Exactly.
like I just don't think he liked me because I was the son of the guy that this computer terminal was about,
Right.
and somehow felt I was privileged, which I can tell many people in no way. I mean, I certainly wasn't struggling, but I also wasn't
No,
privileged. A lot of what I did was on my own,
you
and
bet.
so,
It was a
and
lot on your
so
own. You absolutely.
yeah. So it's really, it was really unfortunate, but it was a funny memory. I still, to this day, it's still a funny thing. You had mentioned Apple Computer too, and I had worked there when Scully was running it for
Oh, I didn't.
Pepsi.
I don't think I remember that.
Yeah, the Pepsi CEO. I had a contract because back, most people don't realize that, but back in like 1989, Apple Computer had their APTA group, Apple um, Developer. I forget the acronym. I'll have to
That's
Google it up.
okay.
But it was
Whatever.
their developer group, and that actually was running on an AS400 at the time.
Oh yeah.
I, IBM Series AS400. I was heavy into it. I ended up getting into IBM stuff,
Right.
and
I know. I remember
I
that.
worked there. In fact, it was in the the late 80's, and they even had they were doing really well at the time. Well, I would say they were really spending money well at the time. They, they that was probably the best way to put it. And they had their computer. I remember walking in every day. It felt so surreal, but they had a grand piano in the building I was in. You'd walk in, there's a grand piano. It's an adorable little Mac sitting on it with the stock ticker. And
Mm,
bad omen there. I guess, I don't know.
yeah.
But anyway, so I'd walk in. I was a consultant. I would do my work there, and I remember around 2 p.m. I think, or 2:30 every
Mhm.
day, an aerobics instructor would come in and start playing
No.
music, like no
Oh,
matter if you were on the phone or not. And she
oh
would just
my.
like, all right, everybody, get up, let's walk and do all this stuff. And it was just the weirdest thing. And for like 5 minutes, she's like reminding people to get up. It was good, but it was also really weird, I thought.
Uh,
Um, but that was kind of that Apple vibe. But anyway, this is all kind of like, uh, I think it's important to kind of bring forward kind of both of our experiences. And I just thought it was an interesting moment in time with computer industry and computers. And
uh, I know when I came up to the Northwest to just get away from the semiconductor valley, really, just the whole uh, nuance, I guess you could say, of that era. I was burned out, but it was my fault. It was my problem. And I was thinking about the only reason I brought up Steve Jobs is he kind of went through the same thing, um, except and he kind of just walked away from all of it and went up to Northern California. lived on a farm by himself or something. I don't know. But then he finally got some kind of help. I don't know if it was a guidance or count, whatever. And then they realized that Apple was his company, that he was the heart of it. And
Yeah.
his board of directors brought him back. And I don't blame them for what they did with me, but I do blame them for not reconsidering the fact that I was the founder of the company. It was named after me. And I would have definitely loved to have gotten to be back involved with the company in some fashion,
And
because
what also,
we could have
yeah,
had success, but they didn't do
yeah,
it.
exactly. What also doesn't make sense to me too, it wasn't just a rapid descent and then explosion, right? Over
No, no.
it. They had plenty of advanced warning, and as it was going down
Oh God, yeah, they just
over
left it.
many months, they could have
Yeah.
brought you back, and that is, it is unfortunate, because you're right. You have a great ability to sell, and
Right,
it's genuine, and that really makes a difference. It's not just about, what technologies you have, but it's also
right.
the person behind it. So
Thank you. Yeah, you're right on. And like I said, there's just basically 2 points. The board made a good decision in letting me go because I kind of let myself go already.
yeah.
That said, when it started to crater, like you said, and it was doing pretty well. The
Oh
big
yeah.
thing, not to rehash everything, but that press release really drove a knife in the heart, so to speak.
Mm, yeah.
But the thing is, they still could have the board could have got involved and saved that, because all Microsoft was wanting to do was they just wanted that rescinded, and then they would have gone on, and that individual wouldn't rescind it.
That's crazy.
And so, well, it's just a crazy individual. So, but the big thing was, it took it 2 or 3 years to go down to nothing. And I don't even remember what happened to it. I don't know if they sold it to one of the manufacturers or distributors. I honestly don't know what happened to Falco Data Products.
Wow.
I don't
It's
know. I
crazy.
mean, when I just was too much, and I knew I had no control to get back, and they weren't going to let me in, and so I just let it go. So I don't know. I just know one day it was gone.
There any other stories that you can think of besides Nolan Bushnell that you wanted to kind of throw in there from Falco Data
Well,
Products?
I'm sure other people have. I don't know how interesting it is, but in my travels, and I traveled almost constantly every week, pretty much from Monday to Friday or Sunday to Friday. I mean, that was my schedule.
Yeah.
And and I was working literally almost all over the world. So I was always running into interesting people and meeting them just briefly. So I call it like meeting famous people, kind of ships passing in the night.
Right.
And so I met Margaret Mead. And Margaret Mead is the great anthropologist of her time, and she's the one that kind of put anthropology on the map in the 20s and 30s. And I actually met her when she was getting her luggage at Logan Airport in Boston, and
How
talked to her
funny.
briefly. And she had her famous walking stick, her famous cane that she needed. She had that with her. And then once I was on a trip again from Boston to New York, and I was walking out of the terminal, and this very elderly lady um, had a bag with her, and she was by herself. and she asked me if I could help her put it in the cab, because she just had held the cab. I was on the street at the airport, and so I took her. It was almost like a carpet bag, paisley print, and I took it. And she was a little petite woman, all dressed in black, a black turtleneck, black slacks, short hair, very elegant looking. And so I put it in there, and that was it. Except just as I put it in, and she thanked me, and the cab driver said, "Where are we going, Mrs. Kennedy?"
Oh, wow.
And that was Rose Kennedy.
Wow.
And then I met her briefly.
That's cool.
Yeah, she wasn't real warm and cuddly,
Well, yeah.
but so
Yeah.
I met.
All right. All right. So the last item, or the last story, if you will, this is kind of like story time. The last
Mhm.
story that I wanted to hear from you too is you worked with Nolan Bushnell one time as well. And for those
That's
that,
correct.
yep, and for those that aren't familiar with Nolan Bushnell, I'll put up the wiki link as well. But he really was the creator of Pong, and then started Atari, and did Chuck E. Cheese, and just a
Right.
lot of entrepreneurial things. And I think it's really interesting that you actually had an opportunity to work with him. So maybe I'll hand it over to you now. So you kind of explain how that all transpired and what you guys did.
Well, we knew each other, not too informally, but when I had Falco Data Products, his company literally was across the street. I mean, right across the street. It was called Vent, VENT, and I assume he named it that for inventing things, because he was a really creative inventor, hardware, software, all type of things. He did one called the, I don't know, talking bear. I don't know, battery operated for teddy bears for kids. He was very successful, and was able to take several companies public. And anyway, there was a mutual associate of ours name that I had worked with when I was at Lear Siegler a little bit. And his name was Matt Zuckerman, not to be confused with the other one. But he was Zuckerman,
Not Zuckerberg. Yeah.
not Zuckerberg. Yeah, thank you. And Matt and I were good friends as well, I think I would say. And he was working. He had just taken a company public, I think it was. I don't know the whole details, but it was on the New York Exchange or something. And I had just moved up to the Northwest from Falco Data, and I was deciding on what I wanted to do. And he called me and he said, well, I've got a project I want you involved with because of your name and reputation. And you'll be working with Nolan Bushnell. And so I already knew Nolan, but not like I was going to know him.
Right.
And so this project, I was about 6 months. It was a 6-month project. And so Nolan and I would meet in California because that's where he was. And we would go to different places for this particular project. I don't need to get into the project itself. It was kind of ahead of its time. And I guess it did pretty good for a while. But I was just paid a consultant to work, and Nolan was as well. And to be honest with you, I think they wanted both of our names and reputations to put on their stock resume that had already gone out. It wasn't. It was a startup company. I want to make it clear. We're not talking about a big company. We're talking about a startup company. I don't even remember the name of it. But anyway, we had some things we did together. We went to some computer shows in Las Vegas and meetings in San Diego. And even though I was living in Seattle,
I don't think he ever came up here. He may have, I don't recall. But we got to know each other a lot better. And he was just a kick. The man was so inventive. And we'd be working on meeting some people on a meeting down in San Diego. And after the meeting, we'd be going back to the car. And he said, you know, that guy so-and-so? I said, yeah. He said, that's the kind of guy that would get out of a shower to take a piss. And, and I said, okay. And he was also very, he would tell me more than once, he said, Lee, you and I need to be at top of the mountain because it's more fun at the top of the mountain. I said, amen, brother. We've been there. Because he had some downfalls too, but he made money. His companies went public. He wasn't hurting.
Yeah.
So anyway, then one computer show, we went to Vegas, and we were playing blackjack 21, and I'm playing next to him because we were just taking a break from the show, and like everybody does when you're in the business, well, the computer field.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's watching me, and all of a sudden he stops me from playing. Says, "Lee, I can't stand this any longer. Here's $200. I don't want you to bet less than 20 on any hand." Because I had the money, but I just didn't, it wasn't my bag. I wasn't going to blow it on stuff like that.
Yeah.
But he was a kick. And so
That's
he would
awesome.
do things. So he was very dynamic, very creative, obviously. I liked him a lot. We had respect for each other, and he was really easy to work with. He was a sweetheart. And I think he lives with his daughter or near his daughter in the Los Angeles area.
Oh, funny.
In fact, I'm pretty sure he does.
Yeah.
I think he is about my age, or maybe he might even be a
It
little
says
older.
79.
Oh, 79.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's 79.
And, but we had a great deal, and he certainly knows me and I know him. And because we worked on this project for almost, several months anyway. And that was it. So that's the Nolan Bushnell story.
That's really cool. What's interesting too, it's somebody like that. I mean, Nolan, he was very, he wasn't a rock star. He wasn't out there in front all the time. Like he wasn't a
No.
Steve Jobs, right? So it's interesting. So just imagine you guys, in Vegas and just sitting there at the table and nobody really knowing who that was, but guaranteed, many of them had played his games, so it's kind of cool that way,
Yeah, it is. And he was definitely that way.
That's neat.
So anyway, that's it. Yeah, he was very, I think he could have been a Steve Jobs or Zuckerberg. I mean, he was really good with people. I never saw him publicly speak, but I don't think that'd be a problem for Nolan at all.
That's really cool.
So we had a fun time. I liked him, and I don't like many people.
Well, it's like, yeah, I mean, when you guys are, like you said, at the top of the mountain, there aren't many people, first of all, at the top of the mountain. And usually, and this probably much better than I ever would, but I would think most of the personalities at the top of that mountain are probably a little challenging to work with.
I think that's very diplomatically said.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that is really neat. Well, I really appreciate you spending the time, and I hope other people find this interesting. I think, it's good to capture this just for the archives, and I'll put it out there on YouTube. And I just really want to say thank you for even allowing me to be a part of that experience, from the time.
You're most welcome.
Yeah, the mid 70s all the way up to the 90s, if you will. And
Right.
It was really cool. And I have very fond memories of Kachin and his brother Paul, and many others that worked at Falco, and it really felt like a family. And then you're right, of course, there are problems that do occur, and and that's a part of life. But what a really cool moment in time. It's really neat. So
It
thank you.
was. It was a precursor to a lot of advancements that made the whole thing we were working on obsolete.
Yeah. That's
So
well
I
said.
became obsolete.
No, you're still. Hey, I like. And for those that don't know, I talk to my dad almost every day.
Right.
Monday through Friday anyway, because I enjoy it thoroughly, and it's
Well,
actually
you're
lowers my
you're
blood pressure.
you're kind to say it.
And you can send the check too.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Oh,
honey,
just kidding.
have a good day, and thank you for this. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I look forward to looking at your YouTube.
Yep. Thank you so much, Dad. All right, you take care. I
Okay.
love you so much.
Love you too. Bye bye,
Yeah.
honey.
See you. Bye.
Yeah.